Morning everyone. The topic of this lecture will be Indian Polity by M. Lakshmikan. Before starting our topic, the contents of the syllabus will be historical background, making of the Constitution, salient features of the Constitution, preamble, Union and its territories, citizenship, fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, fundamental duties and basic structure. So before we start with the lecture, the first and foremost lecture will be the Indian Constitution. So the historical background of the Indian Constitution. So when did the Indian Constitution start? It started with when the British came to India in 1680 as the traders in the form of East India Company. So basically, the East India Company landed in India in 1680 as a form of trading. So, and the East India Company was also known as the East India Trading Company or the English East India Company. So this is very important in terms of this is very important for competitive purposes. So the East India Company traded mainly in the subcontinent and China, and in the year 1765 the East India Company obtained Diwani rights over revenue and civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. So the first rule or the first constitutional framework of our Indian Constitution started with the Regulating Act of 1773. So this was the first step taken by British government to control and regulate the affairs of the East India Company. So in this Regulating Act, the first Supreme Court was established in the year 1774. So remember this, and it laid the foundation of a central administration in India. So, and the basic features of the 1773 Regulating Act was the Governor of Bengal was designated as the Governor General of Bengal, and the Executive Council of 4 members was created to assist the Governor General. So the Governor General was to be assisted by 4 members known as the Executive Council, and the first Governor General of Bengal was Lord Warren Hastings. So you should know the difference between the first Governor General of Bengal, the first Governor General of India, and the Viceroy of India. So in this, the first Governor General of Bengal was Lord William Hastings. So the 1773 Act made the governors of Bombay and Madras personages subordinate the Governor General of Bengal. It means that the Governor General of Bengal was to preside over the functioning and act as superior to the governors of Bombay and Madras. So as I've said earlier, it provided the establishment of the Supreme Court in Calcutta in 1774. So remember this. And the Supreme Court comprises the Chief Justice and 3 other judges. So the basic foundation of the judicial system in India started with this Regulating Act of 1773. So, and the next act to be presented was the Peace Act of 1784. The Peace Act was to act as distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the company. It means that the functions of the company between the political and commercial function was divided, and it allowed the court of directors entrusted with the responsibility to manage the commercial affairs of the company. So basically there are two types of functions in the company. One is the court of directors to manage the commercial, the trade and the sales, etc., and the board of control was to look over the administration of the territory. So the Peace India Act was also established the double government act, and lastly the company territories were first time called British possessions in India. So the next act after the Peace Act of 1784 is called the Charter Act of 1833. So this was a final step in centralization of power in India. What is mean by centralization? Centralization means and the act of the act of concentrating the powers in a single authority. So before we before we study that the Governor General of Bengal was to be made authority over the other Governor General. So in this act of 1833, the Governor General of Bengal was made the Governor General of India, and the first Governor General of India was Lord William Bentinck. So remember this: the first Governor General of Bengal was Warren Hastings, and the first Governor General of India was Lord William Bentinck. So, so the so in this act, the laws that were made prior to 1833 was called regulations, and the law made after this 1833 was known as act. So there's a difference between the regulation and the act. Regulations are those laws that are made before 1833, and the laws that are made after 1833 is called acts. And the East India Company became a purely administrative body. So, and for the first time, the Governor General government was also known as the Governor General of India. So these are the functions of the Charter Act of 1833. So next came the Charter Act of 1853, in which this was the last Charter Act passed by the British Parliament between 1793 and 1853. This act created the Legislative Council, and the Legislative Council functioned as a mini parliament. So the Legislative Council was basically termed as a mini parliament, and it in this act, Charter Act of 1853, for the first time, Indians was open for competitive examination in the civil service. Before the Charter Act of 1853, Indians were not allowed to give the competitive examination, but after this, they were allowed, and the first person to become a civil servant of the British government was Satyendranath Tagore, the father of Rabindranath Tagore. So after this Charter Act of 1553, the Crown Rule of India, that is the Government of India Act of 1558. This act, this year is very important because it was this year, after the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857, that the establishment of the British government in India became consolidated. That is, this act became an act for good government in India, and it was this act that the responsibilities of the East India Company was handed over to the British Crown. So it was the first statute enacted by the Parliament for the governance of India under the direct rule of British government. The Government of India Act abolished the East India Company. So basically, the East India Company was abolished, and the British Crown was established. The British Crown assumed sovereignty over India in the East India Company. So the designation of the Governor General of India was changed to the Viceroy of India. So we studied in the Regulating Act of 1773 that the Governor General of Bengal was Warren Hastings, and the Governor General of India was Lord William Bentinck, and the first Viceroy, according to the Government of India Act of 1858, was Lord Canning. So a new position called the Secretary of State was established, and the powers of ground were exercised by the Secretary of State for India. And the Secretary of State for India is a member of the cabinet and is responsible for the British Parliament members. So the Council of India composed exclusively of people from England, and the administration of the country was unitary and rigidly centralized through 1858 Act. There was no separation of functions. So before the act, before the East India Act of 1784, the functions of the East India Company was divided into commercial and political affairs. So by the Act of Government of India Act of 1858, there was no separation of functions. The legislative, executive, civil, and military authority were vested in the Governor General in Council of India, who was responsible to the Secretary of State for India. and the machinery of the administration was totally unconcerned for the public opinion. So the public opinion was not at all required for the machinery of this administration. So next came the Indian Council Act of 1861. This act introduced a grain of popular element by including some non-official members in the executive council while transacting legislative business like legislative council. So in this act of 1861, the Viceroy of India was allowed to nominate members in the legislative council. So in so this is very important. So in the year 1862, the Viceroy of India, Lord Canning, nominated Raja of Benares, the Maharaja of Patala, and Sir Dinakar Rao as to the legislative council. So these three were given a power in the legislative council for they were nominated by the Viceroy of India for suggestions. This act restored the power of the Bombay and Bengal presidencies. The Legislative Council for Bengal was created in the year 1862. The Legislative Council for Northwest Punjab province was created in the 1986. So next came the 1892 Act, the Indian Council Act. This act gave the Legislative Council the power of discussing the budget and addressing questions to the executive. So the budget sessions was included in this act, and this act also provided for the nomination of some non-official members by the Viceroy. So this act was similar to the Indian Council Act of 1861, such that the Viceroy can nominate some non-official members like Indians. The Indian Council Act of 1909, it is also known as the Morley Minto Reform. The Minto was the Viceroy of India, and Morley was then Secretary of State, and this act increased the size of the Legislative Council by including elected non-official members. So the members of the Legislative Councils were allowed to ask supplementary questions, and the first Indian to join the Viceroy Executive Council was Satyendranath Sinha. So this name is very important for prelims in NPSC. So the first Indian to join the Viceroy Executive Council was Satyendranath Sinha, and the 1908 Act introduces a concept called separate electorate. So what is separate electorate is that before before this, the Muslims and the minorities were dissatisfied with the representation of the members to the council. So under the separate electoral act, the Muslim members were elected only by Muslim voters. So this is a strategy by the British government to divide the people in terms of communities. So for the first time, the seed of separatism was sown, and the 1908 Act legalized communalism. So there was a difference between the communals such as Hindus, Muslims, and other minorities. And Lord Minto was regarded as the father of communal electorate because he was the first to initiate this act of 1909, the Morley Minto Reform. So in the question, so if they ask who is the father of the communal electorate, then Lord Minto is regarded as the father of the communal electorate. The Minto-Morley reform did not aim at establishing a parliamentary system of government. The Government of India Act of 1919. So this act came into picture when the Indian National Congress became very active during the First World War and launched the Home Rule movement. It was also known as Montague-Chelmsford reforms. So Chelmsford was a Viceroy of India, and Montague was the Secretary of State. So on August 20, 1919, the British government made a declaration that the policy of His Majesty's government is that of increasing association of Indians in every branch of administration, and the gradual development of self-governing and institution with a view to progressive realization of responsible government in British India as an integral part of the British Empire. So the representation of the Indians in the administration was increased by, and a declaration was made by the British government. So the Government of India Act include diarchy or dual government. So what is diarchy or dual government? So diarchy means that the system of that the the provincial subjects were divided into two parts, that is transferred and reserves. So it also introduced the system of bicameralism and direct election. Bicameralism means there is a legislative assembly and a legislative council for the provinces, and it also led to the establishment of the Public Service Commissions Act in the Government of India Act of 1919, that is in 1926. So in this point, it is given the upper house is called the Council of State, composed of 60 members, in which 34 members were elected. This is a system of bicameralism. And the lower house was also called Legislative Assembly, composed of 144 members, out of which 104 were elected, and the concept of election was introduced. The Indian Legislative Council consisted of the upper house. Now we know them as the Rajya Sabha, and the lower house, the Legislative Assembly, also known as the House of the People, also called Lok Sabha. So the very idea of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha was introduced in this system. This act provided the establishment of the Public Service Commission Act. The Public Service Commission Act was established in 1926. So, and in the year 1927, a statutory commission was appointed under the chairmanship of Seaman to inquire into the report and working of the 1919 Act. So the next was the Simon Commission. The Simon Commission was appointed by the British government on November 1927. So the Simon Commission was a 7-member commission. So 7 members were allowed for the functioning, that they have to report the condition of India under the new Constitution of India Act. So the chairman of the commission was Simon. So all the members of the committee were British, and hence all the parties boycotted the commission. All the parties, including the Indian National Congress and the Muslim and the other Indian parties. So the British government convened 3 round table conference to consider a proposal of Simon Commission. The conference to be attended by representatives of the British government, British India, and the princely states regarding the round table conferences. So the first round table conferences was held between 1930 and 1932. Mahatma Gandhi attended the second round table conference only. So the next act was the Communal Award of 1932. Then on August 4, 1932, the Communal Award was announced by Ramsay MacDonald, the then Prime Minister of India. So if the question comes, who was the Prime Minister when the Communal Award of 1832 was included, so the answer will be Ramsay MacDonald. So why is this thing important? So it is important because it provides for extending separate electorate to scheduled castes. So in fact, the concept of separate electorate depresses the caste were raised by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was himself a scheduled caste. So the proposal was accepted by the British and announced the Communal Award. Gandhi opposed this on the ground that this proposal will disintegrate the Hindu society. So Mahatma Gandhi began infinite hunger strike on Yerawada jail. So this point is very important, against the separate electorate for the scheduled caste. So which jail is the Yerawada jail in Pune, Maharashtra, against the separate electorate for the scheduled caste? The Pune Act of 1932. As the next act was the Pune Act of 1932. As Mahatma Gandhi went on a strike, Dr. Ambedkar was under tremendous pressure to save the life of Gandhi. So hence Dr. Ambedkar accepted an agreement. This was an agreement between the Dalits, the depressed classes, and the upper caste of Hindus. It took place at September 24, 1932, where Mahatma Gandhi was having his hunger strike at Irrawaddy jail in Maharashtra. So the next was the Government of India Act of 1935. It why is this act important? Because it divided the functioning of the government into three. That is the federal list, the provincial list, and the concurrent list. So what are federal list, provincial list, and the state list? The federal list are also called the central list, which are matters concerning the central government, and the provincial list which is called the state list, and the concurrent list, which are both federal and central list. So federal list can include natural resources, railways, etc. State list can include state budget, state affairs, etc. And the concurrent lists are those lists which are both federal lists and provincial lists. For example, cyber laws, etc., which was not very important on this day, but today it is very important. So the Government of India Act of 1935 abolished the hierarchy system in provinces, and it also provided the hierarchy at the center. So the Government of India Act provided the establishment of a Reserve Bank of India. This is a very important topic. So the Government of India Act of 1935 established the Reserve Bank of India in the year 1935. So Government of India Act was given in the year 1935. The establishment of the Reserve Bank of India was recommended by Hilton Young Commission in the year 1926. So the first RBI was established in 1935 in Calcutta, and second 1937 was shifted to Bombay. So this is very important to understand the establishment of the RBI Act. It was established by Hilton Young Commission in 1926 and first set up in Calcutta in 1935 and shifted in 1937. The Indian Independence Act of 1947. So the final conclusion of the Indian Act was passed on 1947. On February 20, 1947, the Prime Minister of India, the Prime Minister of England, Sir Clement Attlee, declared that the British rule will end by June 30, 1948. So the Muslim demanded for the partition because of the resistance from the Muslims, that they will be overshadowed by the Hindus. So they demanded for the partition, which was led by the Muslim League under the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So on June 3, 1947, the government announced that the constitution was not capable to unwilling parts of the nation. So Lord Mountbatten, the then Viceroy of India, put forward the partition plan on the assembly. It was called the Manhattan Plan, also called the June 7 Plan. This plan was accepted by both Congress and the Muslim League. The Independence Act of 1947 ended with the British rule and declared India as an independent and sovereign state from August 15, 1947. This act provided for the partition of India into India and Pakistan. The office of the Viceroy was abolished and provided the Governor General for each dominion, India and Pakistan, appointed by the King. The Act also empowered the Constituent Assembly to frame and adopt any constitution. So this allowed them to make any constitution on their own. The Central Legislative of India, composed of the Legislative Assembly and the Council of States, ceased to exist on August 14, 1947. The Indian Independence Act granted freedom to the British legislature to either join India or Pakistan or to remain independent. So the civil servants were allowed to entitle all the benefits, and Lord Mountbatten became the first Governor General of independent India. So this point is very important. So first Governor General of independent India, and Jawaharlal Nehru became the first became the first Prime Minister of India, and Lord and Muhammad Ali Jinnah became the first Governor General of Pakistan. So this is the end of the lecture for the constitutional framework until the Government of India Act 1947. I hope you understood some topics, and thank you.